Brocula is a cozy life sim title from Destroyer Doggo, a one-person studio. In this game, you play as a vampire called Brocula, who, after waking up from a centuries-deep slumber, must now quickly adapt to the money-driven society around him in order to retain the rights to live in his castle and also to repair said castle, which isn't in such a great shape. Along the way, you have an army of bats to help you with various tasks, and you also run a cult whose followers keep you alive by offering you their blood, because at the end of the day, you're a vampire and need blood to survive. I already put out a video on this game with my initial impressions, in which I said it was off to a good start. For this complete review, I spent a little over 30 hours playing on Xbox and discovered almost everything that the game has to offer. There will be some spoilers in this video, and the only things I don't show are a few events that happen towards the end of the game. Let's start with the story. The developer launched a cinematic trailer for this game in early 2023, and it sets up the premise of the game and is also the only cinematic cutscene in the game. A car accident wakes you up and you end up in the hospital where your old money is no longer accepted. At the same time, you find out that your castle no longer belongs to you, and you are then forced to take up odd jobs to earn a living. Now, before you ask why a vampire needs to work for money and can simply go around feeding on people's blood, as a reminder, this is a cozy life sim title. The main goal of the game is to earn enough money to buy back your castle from the town, but since this is a cozy game, there's no real rush to do so, and you're even allowed to live in the castle for as long as you want. The vampire part of the story often takes a backseat, and you're only reminded of it when you visit your church on Sundays to conduct sermons for your followers. The rest of the time, the game doesn't really seem to care if you're a vampire or just a regular person going around town completing your tasks. The fact that almost all of your work is done during the daytime, which is traditionally forbidden for vampires, shows that the story doesn't want you to take the vampire side of things too seriously. You go around during the daytime because that's when it makes sense for most shops to operate, and working at various shops makes up a large part of the gameplay. Apart from earning back your castle, there's a smaller part to the story that isn't revealed until later in the game, and this is where I wished we had one or more cutscenes to better explain the story. The rest of the story is revealed entirely through in-game dialogue, and it was a bit surprising to me to suddenly discover what Brocula wanted to do after buying back his castle. Due to this, the ending was a bit unexpected, but it does give closure to the premise that was set up in the cutscene. Anyway, what really matters in Brocula is certainly the gameplay. This is a farming game, and there's two ways to look at it. One is that you can run an actual farm in this game growing fruits and vegetables, but it is also a farming game or a grinding game where you need to keep collecting various materials and currencies to progress. If you have played similar games before, then you know what to expect. At the start, progress will be very slow as you try to look around for any and every source of income you can get to buy a few supplies to progress further. As time goes on, more choices open up and you get to decide how you want to spend your day in the game. What surprised me is the sheer number of choices you get for earning money, which is the primary goal. In the beginning, you're presented with 3 options, which is working at 3 shops, a garage, a coffee shop, and a restaurant. You can work at one place only once per day, but you can work at all 3 places every day. Beyond these 3 options, you can also grow fruits and vegetables to sell at the farmer's market. And this is where I ended my initial impressions video, because I thought after playing for 4 hours, these 4 options would be the only ways to make money. But no, the game soon presented me with two new methods as I kept playing, and one of them ended up being so good that I understood why it was hidden from the initial part of the game. Presenting it early would have ended the game very fast. Also, introducing these methods periodically allows the game to feel fresh even after playing for a couple of dozen hours. There are other mechanics here that you would normally expect from games of this genre, such as crafting, talking to various NPCs and completing tasks for them, a day-night cycle that affects what sort of work you can do at any given time, and inventory management. That last part can get a bit annoying late into the game, as you need to micromanage your inventory at all times by placing items you don't need immediately into storage chests. The town in which you live, whose name I didn't see anywhere, is very receptive of a vampire roaming around in broad daylight. There are 6 key characters in the game, one of which, the doctor, you currently can't talk to. The remaining 5 give you tasks, and progressing through all of these tasks will introduce you to the various mechanics available in the game, as well as get you closer to raising a certain amount of money for buying back your castle. Apart from this, there is the ever-changing forest, which contains the good money-making method I mentioned earlier. I won't spoil it here, but it does introduce a new part of the game that I was surprised to find after nearly 6 or 7 hours. I don't think it actually takes that long. It was me who avoided visiting that part of the map for so long because I was busy with the rest of the game. I can mention one thing though, as the name implies, this part of the game contains a procedurally generated area that changes each time you visit it. But let me set some expectations. It isn't as detailed as you might expect it to be, but it is still a good change of pace from the rest of the game, which has a fixed map. On a typical day in Brocula, you wake up, check if your crops are doing fine, look at your task list and decide what you want to do for the day. Do you want to continue earning money by working at the shops, or do you want to progress one of the tasks given by the NPCs? There are no penalties or timers for completing tasks, but some NPCs are available only during certain days of the week, so you will have to plan your schedule accordingly. As night falls, most NPCs are unavailable and your stamina might be running out too, so you can either recharge your stamina by taking supplements and keep working on your farm, or visit the ever-changing forest for some exploration. Or you can choose to come back to your castle and sleep to fully recharge your stamina and skip to the next day. Every Sunday, you visit your church to deliver a sermon to your cult. If you put out some food in front, you can expect a lot more people to show up. Once your sermon is finished, some of your followers may choose to sacrifice themselves by offering their blood to you. At the moment, there seems to be 2 reasons for this mechanic to exist. One is to remind you that Brocula is a vampire, and 2 is to give you another currency to manage called Blood of Faith, which is required to progress in the late game. Apart from this, it doesn't really matter if Brocula engages with this mechanic or not. For instance, he doesn't die if he doesn't consume blood for several weeks. So again, do not take the vampire part of the game too seriously. The gameplay is deceptively simple, but there are a lot of systems in the background working with each other, and this is what keeps the game interesting. You have the freedom to choose what you want to do every day, progress through the game at your own pace, and eventually wrap things up. As mentioned before, the story isn't really that strong, but the gameplay certainly is. Towards the end, I was finding myself playing for multiple hours just because I was excited to finish the final few tasks. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of pixel art in 2024. The art form had its moment in the limelight and it still has a lot of fans, but I belong to the group of people who feel it's time to move on. However, this game started development in 2019, and I think back then this art style didn't feel as saturated as it does today. Anyway, if you feel that playing a pixel art game today is exhausting, let me assure you that after you get over that initial roadblock, it won't matter. The gameplay loop takes over and the art blends into the background. This is a good thing because if the art was bad, you would be noticing it all the time. But Brocula's art does have a certain charm to it with a beautiful pastel color palette. And since you'll spend a lot of time running around town, you'll appreciate the fact that it feels like you're running around in a painting. The game does make an attempt to inject some personality into the town with its visuals, with NPCs goofing around at the farmer's market, a kid playing with a skipping rope, and a cat with a manly voice whose backstory I won't spoil here. That doesn't mean the art isn't without flaws. Brocula doesn't really look like what he does in the cutscene, and I noticed that the doctor is hilariously shorter than other people around him. But again, issues like these fade into the background once you get into the thick of the gameplay loop. The benefit of using pixel art in a game really shows in its performance. Since the assets don't take a long time to load, the game runs very smoothly. Entering and exiting locations happens almost instantly with a really cool Batman-like logo handling the transition. And I never had a crash even when I was handling dozens of objects in my inventory. There's no voiced dialogue in the game, even in the opening cutscene, so it falls on the sound and music in the game to carry the story forward. Also, in a game that relies heavily on repetitive tasks, it is crucial for the background music to be enjoyable enough to keep you engaged for a long time, without being too disruptive. And the game succeeds at this. There are only 4 tracks which cover all the sections of the game, and all of them are quite soothing and set the tone for this relaxing title. The sound effects are a bit of a mixed bag, but for the most part do their job in conveying certain key actions like talking to someone or planting, harvesting crops, and so on. On the whole, it is the combination of these sound effects and music tracks that keep the game enjoyable for more than 30 hours of gameplay. Originally, I was a lot more critical about the game in this review, but by the time I started recording, the developer had already fixed most of the issues I wanted to highlight. For example, during my playthrough, my 2 biggest pain points were that the day-night cycles would go by really fast and that my stamina bar would run out real quick. Luckily for new players and unluckily for me I guess, right after I finished my playthrough, a patch came out that fixed both issues, and now the day-night cycle is much more forgiving and so is the stamina bar. And this is where the game benefits from having a solo developer at the helm. He's very receptive of feedback and is able to work much faster in releasing patches. One might say that these issues should have been fixed before launch, and that is true. But we can't turn back time, and the best course of action now is to fix these issues soon, which is exactly what's being done. Unfortunately, the game received a string of negative reviews during the launch window due to early players not being happy with the state of the game at launch, which is fair. If you pay for a product, you expect it to work well on day 1, not on day 10. But players have been giving huge live service games a lot of time for fixing their issues, several weeks, even years after the initial launch. So I think it's only fair to give this game another chance as well, especially since a lot of the issues have already been fixed. But in any case, I would recommend this game for the immersive gameplay loop and the relaxing experience it provides. It may not be everyone's cup of tea, but if you like this genre of games, Brocula is definitely worth a look.